The way that I define true wisdom, which comes from the soul, it is true no matter what day and time it is. That's wisdom. It is not date dependent. It is not reliant upon 3 months ago or 3 months from now. It's true always.
Being able to access more of our soul's energy than we've ever been able to before, to then do something with that energy that empowers our individual selves rather than has our ego seeking out other things out externally to us.
Then we're missing out on the voice that can tell us what is coming to us, individually and collectively. And it is easier and easier to not consume any information or be distracted off of the path of your own soul's evolution by taking in someone else's belief system. The ego wants to seek someone else telling it what's happening, why it's happening, and what's going to happen, and how to prepare yourself for what's happening.
Family, I wanted to just take a moment to pause here. Many of us are feeling the sense that the way that we've been creating, building, expressing, something about it no longer seems to be working. We've been taught to create from pressure, effort, performance. But through a very powerful transmission with a previous guest, Anne Tucker, where she channels the mother of creation, it became evident that we are at a turning point. Creation is changing direction. And for the first time ever, Anne and I are coming together for a live initiation called the Freedom Project. This is a 3-week journey designed to dissolve fear-based creation and restore freedom from an internal lived state so that creation becomes natural again. This isn't about learning new techniques. It's about removing what's been quietly blocking your authentic creative channel. If you feel that pull into more truth, freedom, and coherence in the way that you live and create, you can join Anne and I now for our 3-week initiation. We'll be starting in a few weeks. The link to sign up is in the description, or you can scan the QR code on screen right now, and I will see you inside. Eluña, welcome back on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now globally and in your life?
Well, that's a rather loaded question at the beginning of 2026 about excitement for global things. But there is excitement in a unique way globally, because where we are right now is at the very clear ending of an era. And of course, this ending has been unraveling for some time. And this year marks a very significant shift in that ending. There is an amount of this unraveling that has happened, that we have reached now collectively, that is where this wound up mass of lies and corruption that has been, and I will also say enslavement, that has been present on this planet is loose enough for people to finally start seeing it for what it is. And so there is excitement in that, along with very wise caution, and I would say prudence as well, around how to navigate this exact phase that we're in, because the excitement can easily lead to anxious overwhelm. And it can also easily lead into, I would say, a state of kind of fantasy in a variety of ways. So I am cautiously excited. I am calmly excited, as paradoxical as that may sound, for that globally. And on a personal level, because of all of this ending that I have mentioned and the way that this era is ending, there has been an invitation to shift the focus of my work and the way that I am able to guide people at this time that we find ourselves in. And that has broadened my understanding of true education and what it means to be a guide or a teacher at this time. And it has also expanded how I am able to serve in education and what the real definition of education is. And so it has led to a very significant creation, actually, that I am preparing for, and that is something that I am excited about. Is this mystery school, actually, is what it is, around archetypes and the ancient patterns that exist within our soul, and how when we become aware of these patterns, not through identification as them, but we become aware of them as part of the ancient template of our soul and of all souls, that is how we come to know a deeper self, and we all return or remember how to be our own guide and our own prophet, if we will, for our life. And so that is what I am excited about in a summary.
Beautiful. And before we explore a little bit of the shifts that you say that you're really calling to make in your work, I'd love to explore what you mean by this era that is ending. How long has this era really been going on? And what is on the other side of an ending of an era so big and vast as what we've been going through collectively?
You know, what I have come to realize is that when I have tried to timestamp something in this world, it always seems like when I go to timestamp it, it moves, and the timestamp is now inaccurate. And the consciousness around that I am unfolding into is about the nature of how malleable our reality is, and the perception that we have of linear time is only a perception. It is not a fixed law, so to speak, which means if we try to timestamp something, we are likely inaccurate because time is moving and we are moving through time in such a way that it's very difficult to actually pinpoint something. So that is what I would say in response to how long this has been going on. Thousands of years. That's what I can say. And looking through history, whether we look at ancient stories of creation, and in that same way, in those same stories, there are also ancient prophecies of exactly this time, and which by the way is done intentionally. A story of creation prophesizing where we are right now, that gives a lot of hints as to the way that we are meant to understand our world and also our own individual life and experience. So I will say that in parentheses. And also when I look back at a topic and a time that many of the people who listen to you are familiar with, is the time of Atlantis and Lemuria. That ancient time, there are so many details that can be looked at that parallel where we are right now. And there are also ancient stories that come out of Egypt that also detail, and the Bible, all of these taking place during different times, supposedly, that talk about very much where we are right now, because history rhymes with itself. And so we are on this spherical upward spiral tract. And it's somewhat easy to see when you're looking for patterns that where we are has also been where we have come from. And so although it looked different in Atlantean times or Lemurian times, there was still this move toward an abuse of power and using the natural state of will to override another person's natural state of will. That is what was taking place in Atlantis. And that was the shift in consciousness that I was allowed to witness and understand more fully quite a while ago, that really changed everything in Atlantis during that time. It was this attachment to the use of power and will that went against the natural law and rhythm of things. That is very much where we are right now. There is this movement toward everything that is technological without a thought around how it affects the rest of the world. So the amount of, for one example, the amount of resources that are required to power electronics that we have, the batteries that are used in there and the components that make up those batteries, the human lives and the natural world, the way that they are affected is detrimental in every way. And then AI, and cloud storage really uses so much natural resources and natural materials in order for that to work. And so there is this desire to produce and create more in this technological realm without the thought of how the natural world is affected, without being in rhythm or harmony with the natural world. That is one very small example with technology that mimics the same thing that was happening during Atlantean times and Lemurian times. So this experience that we're in right now as a collective, it is the story of humanity. And I don't, even though I'm explaining it like this, I don't perceive it in a negative or dramatic sort of way, in terms of kind of taking sides in one way or another. It is part of what we are here to experience. It's part of what the source of all that has created to experience. And so there is that very macro perspective to hold when we're moving through something like this. And when we are able to perceive the world in a more mythic and symbolic sense, it becomes easier to perceive patterns and also to recognize that those patterns hold the key to unlocking challenges, to unlocking gifts that we contain, to unlocking solutions, let's say, to the way the world is and the way that we want to see the world moving forward. So this death that we happen to be in at this time, which is made to be quite chaotic, is leading us to a new way of being as well. And so we can, if we look back in history, as best we are able with the sources of history as they are, we are able to see how we are also able to move forward. And that's exciting to me.
I'm gonna touch a sensitive topic because you brought up the misuse of power that has been tracked and patterned throughout thousands of years, even from the times of Atlantis and Lemuria. Right now, we're seeing at the world stage this misuse of power in our face and things that have been hidden for many, many years. I'm talking specifically about the e-files, to not clearly say the whole thing because of censorship. But I did want to explore for a second, if you look at what's going on through these mythic eyes and why these things are coming up to the surface, why we're able to see them. I know it's affected a lot of people more than we realize. Just seeing it all over our Instagram feed, seeing it all over the news, or in alternative news sources. What is the significance of all of these things coming to our purview, our perception, from this lens of the mythic eyes?
So, let me start here. I will not give a timestamp because it's actually not necessary to understand this. So I'm just going to speak rather abstractly. And for those of you who are listening, you can apply this framework to almost any time in history. So that's why I'm not going to give it a timestamp. The first abuse of power and overpowering that took place on this planet was done at the soul level. When human beings when they believe that they are cut off from their soul in some sense, which could mean, I should say, that there needs to be some kind of gatekeeper between them and their soul. That somehow they don't have access to their soul, to the deep self, to the true nature within. All of those can be called the soul. When humans believe they are cut off from that, they are much easier to control. So that was the first level of fragmentation, of being cut off, of using power over, was the soul. Everything after that became easier. The next level was the mind. The human mind has become so fragmented that it is difficult not to call the mass majority of humanity schizophrenic. Yes, by the EDM-5 definition, the book that talks about what mental disorders are, and who knows, maybe we're on 6 or 7 now, I don't keep up with that, whatever version we're on. The description of schizophrenia is one who is at odds with themselves, who is at battle with themselves, who has multiple voices or beings inside that are at odds and that cannot agree on something, and that tend to have their own unique kind of personality traits, and therefore a person with defined schizophrenia can do things and say things and then not remember that they did or said that, because they are basically in a whole other person. That is the most extreme example, and it is important for us as human family members to see another family member in that way, to understand that is happening within the mass majority of us in a more minor way. Because the fragmentation of the mind and the personality makes it almost impossible to then get back in touch with your soul. Because a whole personality is one who is able to learn how to be in service to the soul. So the mental fragmentation was the next place. When we then go down further to the heart, people being cut off from the heart, being numbed to emotions, being numb to emotional, energetic states of being through variety of means. The media in all forms, songs, movies, news stories, showing and portraying incredibly violent, sexually abusive, all types of trauma, showing that in full display, horrific movies and
very
images.
Graphically too.
Very graphically, that numbs the heart. It numbs the emotional state and says, I'm okay, this is normal. So our heart totally closes and we are numb. And then of course we can throw into that when we have addictive substances given to us, we are also cut off and numbed from our own inner state of being. So that is this very complex, this relationship between the heart and the mind, this very complex dynamic that is there. We've now been cut off from the heart. And of course, the perpetuation of war mentality, I mean, it was only in the year of your birth, I believe, Emilio, that finally in all 50 states, it was no longer legal for husbands to rape their wives. Rape was legalized. It was illegal for a married woman to deny her husband intimately. That only happened in 1993.
Wow.
So this numbing of what is allowed is here between the heart. So now we come to the fourth level of fragmentation and coercion of power, and that is on the physical level. Everywhere you look, everywhere you don't look, because if you're just breathing, you are taking in microplastics. I mean, at an insane rate, at a crazy, traumatizing, producing and promoting chronically ill, and now affecting future generations' rate of microplastics, because we are breathing in microplastics. Because let's just, again, simple example, if you're wearing a polyester piece of clothing, there is, in the acrylics or polyester blend, there are microplastics in there. When you rub your shirt and you start seeing the little fuzzies fly around, you're breathing that in. Those are microplastics. That's just one small example of where microplastics come from in the air. And then, of course, it's in our food and water systems for a variety of reasons. And actually, it was just a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, a scientific study was finalized that they were able to prove that the sperm in a man will pass on due to the concentration of microplastics in the male's body, which then affects their sperm. That man has a higher likelihood to pass on and give birth to a child with type 2 diabetes, where it's unavoidable. It's a genetic, now inherited disease that the child is exposed to type 2 diabetes. And so that means that future, now that we have understood epigenetics in the past, hint, now that we've understood it in the past, we're beginning to understand epigenetics in the future. And the way that is affecting us, where we currently are right now, and the choices that we've made in the past, how that's affecting our future generations.
Yeah.
So, all of that is how we have seen power move through us in those systems. And what we have been experiencing, this age that we are in, the ending of one era and the beginning of another, we can call, and it is called, the age of disclosure. Many people have this idea that disclosure can mean maybe only one thing. There are some people who think disclosure means disclosure of, let's say, ET contact on this planet. That is kind of a primary way of understanding disclosure. But disclosure means the disclosure of truth. And we can also add the disclosure of, or rather the age of discernment, as well as the age of disillusionment. That's where we are. Which I always find funny, because it's like AD, age of disillusionment, disclosure, after death. That's where we are right now. And while we are moving through this, because we must learn always from our past, because the past isn't really the past, and there is no beginning and end. We must be able to have this lens. I believe it is critically important and very helpful also to have this lens of looking at the past and seeing things from this symbolic or mythological lens and saying, okay, so there was another time where there was actually the age of enlightenment, so-called. Back in medieval times, it followed the Dark Ages. All of a sudden, we have this renaissance of understanding, and this age of enlightenment comes. We are in that place again. And what must be remembered is that there was still this desire of whatever we want to call it, the people, the beings who want to abuse power and use willpower in an unnatural way, the dark forces, whatever word you want to call it. Those beings witnessed what was happening during this Renaissance, during this age of enlightenment, and they saw, okay, so where is the weak point here? And where can we take the greatest advantage? And that is when this huge turn of religious authority also started to take place in a very massive way, of people needing to move toward you do not have a right to communicate with God, and you can't communicate with your soul. I, the priest, need to do that for you. And don't forget to pay on the way out if you want to make it to heaven and not have to burn in hell eternally.
What was the weak point there that they identified in the Renaissance age?
It was the connection to the divine. Because during that time, the amount of, and this is always the case, and it is true right now as well, during a time of significant shift and upheaval at the end of any era, there is always an influx of chaos and chaotic energy, which I want to make a metaphor about to the body. And simultaneously, there is an influx of creative energy available. That is paralleled in the body. When someone is going through healing, there is an influx of inflammation that is taking place. And in that place of inflammation, things are being broken down, cells are being destroyed, apoptosis is taking place, etc. And at the same time, there is an influx of anti-inflammation also taking place in the body, and new cells are growing. There is new life also being made available. So as above, so below, as within, so without, all of that is what's taking place in our body is reflected collectively. And so in this age of enlightenment, the people had such an influx of creative energy. That is when there were so many new inventions taking place that led to an increase of more life. And there was an increase in art, in music. This shift that took place in the arts was massive during that time. The poetry that came out during that time, the architecture, the painting, the murals. Oh my gosh. It was alive with spirit, because it was also the ending of an era. And that point of people being in touch with the divine, a great strength, is also a great weakness. And so once that was discovered, people started to be coerced into, only in the church are you able to have this connection, because look, this is where the murals are. So artists were given this space to be in, of course, sacred geometric buildings many times, in certain cathedrals and different churches, and their creation was opened up, and they were able to paint beautiful frescoes, beautiful murals, and the building itself, the architecture of the building also opened people up. And then within that building, people opened up their energy and directed it entirely to a priest or a father, many different words for different religion. And that's where they were externalizing their power. And that is the biggest piece to me, is that because there is such an influx of creative energy available, there is this incapacity that many people have to hold the incoming energy. So we must increase our capacity to be able to hold it so that we are not tempted to externalize that power again. Because when I look at what is happening right now, and what I was mentioning to you the other day, about this feeling of disillusionment that I've been experiencing within, I'll say, the new age spiritual space, is people coming up with whatever will sell. Now, that's kind of one extreme and very cynical perspective. The other, the perspective that I hold is that the majority of people are not ill-intentioned and genuinely believe that what they are offering is something of benefit. And that's completely fine. It is innocent in its essence. There is still, though, this fixation on prophecies, because when there's this much chaos going on, the most uncomfortable thing to do is sit in not knowing. The ego wants to seek someone else telling it what's happening, why it's happening, and what's going to happen, and how to prepare yourself for what's happening. But what we are here to do is to learn, and it's really remember, but I will say learn our true nature. And the only way we can learn is when we are sitting in I don't know. Because I don't know is the threshold that allows us to step through the doorway into the unknown, which is where we learn more about our true nature, the thing that we haven't seen. But if we are externalizing our power to someone else telling us how to get there, or again, what's coming to us, then we're missing out on the voice that can tell us what is coming to us, individually and collectively. So that is the age that we are in, and that is really about this ending of this era.
What's so beautiful about this threshold that we're in, that I've heard you mention before, is that right now there's more soul energy accessible than ever before. So even with this disillusionment that you described to me around our fixation on these predictions and these prophecies, really you're shifting your work into helping people become their own guide and master. But I wanted to tie in there how that then connects with being able to access more of our soul's energy than we've ever been able to before, to then do something with that energy that empowers our individual selves rather than has our ego seeking out other things externally to us.
Yeah, that's I think really that's the question right now to be asking for each of us. And the way that I define true wisdom, which comes from the soul, is that it is true no matter what day and time it is. That's wisdom. It is not date dependent. It is not reliant upon 3 months ago or 3 months from now. It's true always. And that is the information that our soul gives to us individually. And because our soul is a unique expression of source, and all wisdom comes from the same source, the way wisdom comes through someone is unique to them, but also unique for them. The words that we speak are for us, and the wisdom that comes through is for us. And it is beautiful when that can support another person. If we do not have the practice of letting the ego be integrated, which is one of, I would say, maybe my kind of my biggest thing, is about integrating the inner self while simultaneously teaching that ego, that little self, to be calm, to let go of control, which is perhaps maybe it's certainly one of my greatest lessons, is letting go of control, letting go of the need to know. And sitting in that discomfort that I was just describing is one of my greatest lessons. And it's for the ego to learn over time. My ego has now learned, oh, okay, there really is something deeper within that is steadier, that is slower, that actually always knows just what to do and just what to say and just what decision to make. We have to practice being slow. And on a physiological level, that means slowing our nervous system down and not stimulating our nervous system in order that this wisdom from within come forward more easily. If we are always seeking sensationalized content, as an example on YouTube, or like we need to know what's happening from our favorite channeler or psychic or what have you, it is the same thing as seeking a very heightened sense in our own nervous system. So physiologically, that must be slow, so that we can then practice slowing our own self down, turning off the analytical mind, which loves to predict and fill in the blanks, because the ego does not want to be in a blank unknown, so it tries to fill it in. We have to practice being okay with that unknown, so that this steady, timeless wisdom can come through. And it's timeless because it comes from the soul, which has no beginning and no end, because it is the same as source. It is the spark of source. And so that means when we begin to tune into this wisdom, the wisdom speaks of the ancient past and speaks of our future. And so we are able to once again reclaim the knowledge of knowing our own self and what is actually true and aligned for us individually, rather than listening to someone else tell us This is what your soul is here for. This is what your soul has experienced. We don't need to be there anymore. That was a tool and a resource of an era that is ending. Now we're in the age of doing for ourselves and remembering our own sovereignty in that. So it's a practice.
In a way, it's also like a 4-minute mile that was necessary, because once you see that there are people that exist that open themselves up to their own higher wisdom, that do these channelings, that activate these abilities within themselves, it almost seems like now, maybe not everyone is there, but we're almost heading into an era where we get to be that ourselves. And then my question is, then how do we relate to each other then? Because normally you would have this guide or oracle or guide or teacher that would proclaim these teachings to other people, and then they would listen. So, but when everyone is their own guide and master, how then does our relationship to each other as a collective species begin to shift and evolve?
That is the secret to unity consciousness. Because when we listen to our own true nature, we learn that it is the only nature. There is only one nature. There is only one source. And before humans began to share prophecies or oracular expressions, as you said, through words, every human knew how to read, but not through the symbols that we call letters today. Because before we had written language, humans were reading the earth. They were reading nature. They read the clouds in the sky. They read the dunes of sand and the way that the wind moved over it. They read the bubbles in the water, which the Kogi in Colombia still do to this day, in fact. That is true reading. And it turns out that all of that, we would all be reading the same book if we were all reading the earth. We would all be reading the same language and ultimately the same nature, because there is only one nature with infinite expression. And the word, actually, for prophet, the root of that word, it comes from two Greek words, pro, which means before, and phete, I believe, which means speak. Before speech is how you become a prophet. You are able to see prophecy when you tune into what comes before speech, which is this earth that is all we know. The omens and the guidance that come from reading this planet and what is happening around us, both in the natural world, so to speak, as in when you're in the mountains or by a stream. And now, of course, the reading is more complex when we take in the natural world of what is happening around us on the global stage, because that is also now part of the natural world, which is why perceiving and reading the world through this symbolic way leads to true wisdom, and we would all be learning how to read, again, the same book and ultimately expressing the same nature.
I'm picking up on this energy of I told you so energy. It's like when, our mom tells us to not do a certain thing, we go ahead and we do it anyway, and then it ends up in a bad situation. I told you so. And if we were to just tune in back into the beginning of this thread of everything that is coming up to the surface, there are many people, and a lot of us have been boxed into this. You're a conspiracy theorist, right? You are spreading misinformation and all these things that have been labeled onto those people that maybe did see beyond and see past these illusions that are placed upon us. And as now these are coming up more to the surface in the world stage, how would you go about, there could be a segment of people that are staying within that "I told you so" energy, of like, oh, I was telling everyone this for years, I knew about this for decades. Because when I tune into that energy, for me, it just feels like it doesn't serve the whole. And I wanted to explore that with you and see how else we could go about it, because even a lot of people tuning into this conversation have known about this misuse of power for many, many years. And I know you included in there as well.
Yeah. And in fact, I have very much avoided some of the topics that, as you mentioned, could be called conspiracy theories, out for a variety of reasons. But it is now kind of the time where it doesn't need to be hidden anymore. And if someone is offended by it or can't handle it, that's really okay. It's just not their time, and that's fine. What is currently going on, as you mentioned with the e-files, and many other aspects of what we are seeing and going to continue to see, of course, unfold this year and next, they are expressions. One lens to perceive them by is as an expression of a fragmented soul and a fragmented personality. Because again, it is all a reflection. It's all a reflection of what's happening in us and outside of us. And this is a very complex topic that I myself would not claim to understand. But what I know to be true is that as we as a collective, as we have moved through the ages and greater darkness has entered into our being, it has called upon a greater and more complex need to integrate all of these dark aspects. If we go way back to the beginning, humans were innocent. They were just innocent beings that were here. And that innocence was taken advantage of. Again, complex story. I myself am not going to claim that I know fully why or how that happened. There are glimpses that I have received, and that is all. It happened, though. And over time, greater and greater darkness has entered into us. And so we can see, and also it has been exploited. The innocence has been exploited, and greater levels of perversion of the light, in every definition of that word, is what we are seeing come to the surface right now. Really, really dark. So our role is to integrate our own inner self and our own ego and shadow self so that we can contribute to the wholeness of being here at this time. And that requires, I say this time and time again, it requires mastery. It requires a willingness to walk the path of mastery in order to do that, because to say this in other words, other than just integration, what it's asking us for is to love every being that is involved in the e-files, to love them whole. Wow. That calls on the true unconditional love of Source. I'm still working on that myself. That is what it calls on, because the only way we can integrate internally is to love all parts of ourself. And that means it has to be shown outside of us too, that somehow we have to love these other parts, because love is the thing that transforms.
How else would you go about reconciling with these darker or shadowy aspects within our own heart that maybe even some are, as you said, are being reflected to us in the external world, that we maybe don't want to associate with, because that would call upon a level of ego that would, have to admit that it's not perfect, that it's not the version of itself that it thought itself to be. Maybe even exploring your own personal journey of how that has unfolded for you around reconciling with these parts that are inherently within all of us. Like there's dark and light within all of us.
Yeah. I have certainly been on, and still am on, a journey of that. And I have always been interested in change or transformation. That's the easiest way to say it, since I was quite young, for a variety of reasons. And it started from I would say a kind of a wounded aspect, that there was this desire to change because there was a part of me that believed, and I'm still healing through this, that I am inherently unworthy as I am, therefore I must continue to transform. So that is what started me on the path, and that has evolved to be, I am inherently worthy, and I always want to be better. I always want to be more like the creator. And so that has converted to a more creative sort of path, rather than a feeling like I need to destroy something that is not good or inherently unworthy. Right. And I think that has supported the opening that I have to greater levels of compassion, to things that I can't comprehend or justify. That of actions and behaviors that other people show. And just like what you mentioned earlier, with there being what has come through me is that there is a higher level of soul energy available, creation energy, source energy. There is equally, and I think very clearly, a higher level of dense energy, chaotic energy, and I will say parasitic energy that is also simultaneously present. And this is, again, where it gets quite complex, and it is something that I myself am working to understand and contemplating, maybe too often, but just about every day. I am contemplating the relationship between this darkness that we see and parasitic entities or dense thought forms, how they play a role in that, and the obstruction that is created to healing or integration from those entities. Now, from the largest macro perspective, we are technically doing that to ourselves, because there is some way for us to participate in healing this parasitic entity. That's one perspective. I don't know if that's true 100% of the time, but I know that is one aspect. The influx of parasitic entities that is here right now makes this task of integrating these dark parts and loving these dark parts into wholeness very, very challenging, because it creates obstructions, as I mentioned, and it perpetuates dark thoughts and looping that doesn't get a person anywhere. And there's more that happens from that. If people are inspired to do things that are very destructive, violent, chaotic, and they don't really understand why, it is likely the influence of a dark entity. And when let's look at it like this. One of my favorite teachers talks about it like this. The traumas that we have and the stories that those create, and therefore the fragmented aspects that are created inside, they can be perceived as spells being put on us. That's how they are looked at in mythological storytelling narratives, is someone is under a spell, such as the spell of depression, the spell of anxiety, etc. They're under a spell. So they see and perceive the world from that place, from that spell, and they don't know how to break it. They don't know how to get out of that spell. Sometimes people go even deeper into this spell, into this dark energy that's in them, and then they come upon perhaps a power, a dark entity that offers them some way of getting out of it, and they just find themselves deeper in it. Like someone taking the easy way, so to speak, if they're depressed and they begin consuming some type of substance that numbs them, like, alcohol. They fall into addiction of some kind. They are more easily persuaded by dark entities. But then there's this other path that can be taken. When someone comes into that, if they are able to hold this more compassionate lens, is, I think, the best way to describe it. There's compassion. There's a desire to love and understand this part. Just like in every fairy tale, the thing that breaks all spells is true love. That's what breaks every spell. So if we can find true love for this part within us, and we can see the wound or spell, this trauma, as something that contributes to our power, as something that contributes to our offering here on this planet, we are able to strengthen and empower ourselves and no longer be brought down by this density, but instead we become strong enough to now carry it with us. That's not me saying that you bypass the trauma, that you repress the emotions. It's not about any of that. It is about a reorientation to what is happening inside, and to not being victimized by the spell that you yourself chose, and instead to be strengthened and empowered through curiosity and being in a state of wanting to discover and uncover more, that we are able to grow into our own strength that is unique to us as a soul. And that, I think, happens individually, and eventually, with all of this individual weaving, we will see it take place collectively as well.
Now that we went all magical, if I refer back to the Harry Potter films, the reason why when Voldemort cast the spell to murder Harry and his mother, the reason he didn't die was because she cast the strongest spell of all, which was love, and that's why Harry survived. And it's really beautiful, because when we're talking about through the mythic lens, all of these movies, like, we don't even have to go back to the Greeks to receive their myths. We have modern myths, which is these movies that have created an imprint in consciousness. And one thing that I wanted to tune in there was, you're mentioning that we're also in a time of heavy unburdening, and you had a special realization around some ways that people can unburden themselves, because you talked about the path of unburdening yourself with substances, for example, with alcohol and with other things that influence or maybe infiltrate also the way that your mind and your soul can move through. But you talked about a very different way of unburdening ourselves, if you can recall on that, because I feel like it's also a powerful practice as well. I can jog your memory, because you probably channeled that.
Are you referring to when... yeah, go ahead, jog my memory.
Yeah. Well, you said, normally we'd want to unburden ourselves with other people in our lives, and that to a certain degree helps. But you talked about unburdening yourself with God. And I wanted to tune into what that path means to you.
Oh, wow. My favorite topic. So the God, the creator, source, the divine power, whatever we want to call it, is everything. And its nature is love. When we unburden ourselves with God, which can go by many names, but I personally like that phrasing of it for a few reasons. Because when we are carrying around guilt or shame, we are weighed down by it. And even depression, when it is looked at through a symbolic lens and understood from both an internal and external perspective, there is a heaviness and a weight to depression because we are carrying things around. And it's somewhat unique to each person of what they're carrying around that is weighing them down. But the root is ultimately shame, guilt, fear. Because that is in somewhat of a direct contrast to the nature of God, when we go within, and not to another person outside of us, right? Not confessing to a priest, but when we go within and we are with ourself and we open up a dialogue just through our intention, not because you have to say some magical words to make it happen. Whatever your ritual is for you to tune in and open up that dialogue. And you are able to begin to express these places where you have been weighed down. Emotions come through, of course. That is an aspect and an expression of unburdening, is just allowing ourselves to cry. That is typically what happens. Even if we feel angry in the unburdening, it usually comes through in tears, generally speaking, when we are actually unburdening ourselves. Because anger doesn't feel good in the body. It's not a pleasurable experience. When we have, again, returned to a more open heart, it doesn't feel good. It feels like fire, and it makes us feel quite exhausted, actually. And so that is a different way that someone may think that they are unburdening themselves. And I think that there's a time and a place for that. But in this instance, anger comes through as tears more often than not. And in this expression, whether it's anger or guilt or shame or fear, grief, the feeling of injustice, there are so many things that could come up that are burdening us. When that comes up and we allow ourselves to continue to open more deeply to what is happening, and we are both expressing what's in the deep heart, as well as listening, we are able to gain wisdom. In even the release, there is this wisdom that comes, because there is some amount of wounding that is present in order for us to have been carrying that around. It's left some wound. It may have arrived through a wound, or it may have created a wound from us picking it up. But when we are able to go in to that wound, to that space, the wound can become this space of creation, a womb. The wound can become a womb. And it allows for the creative potential of something else to come through, because we are allowing ourselves to unburden with God, rather than alone, rather than through a pillow. And that can come in many forms of journaling or just speaking. Again, whatever the ritual is that a person has. But it's done with intention. And when it is done with intention, that place of destruction, that place of inflammation, can then open to becoming a place of creation. A place where new life is able to emerge.
What is the greatest creative potential that you've tuned into for individuals at this time?
What I have been feeling into is people letting go of really what I have spoken of letting go of this need to externalize power, thinking that someone else needs to give them the answer. And that can be seen across the board in every in almost any place, including in this new age world, if we want to call it that, as well as the mainstream news. Through the stories that we read in the news, when we can see with our own eyes what has happened because of a recording on a cell phone or what have you, but then the story that comes back is something completely contradictory to what has been recorded and witnessed with our own eyes. And the story is attempting to tell us what the truth is, rather than us knowing the truth with our own eyes. is crazy, and can be seen everywhere. Again, whether you look in the new age world, the mainstream world. And so the greatest potential that I see, and that I have that has been moving through me, and that I have been guided to both learning from and sitting in myself, and also welcoming others to be with me in, is for us to just return to the ancient wisdom that has always been present, without this constant focus on something that is out there, on something that is ahead of us in some way, some future possibility that's out there, that there's no way to grasp it in the now. That release of naivete in a lot of ways, and also of people choosing to just take a stand and say, no, I am choosing the truth that is here, not what you're telling me. That's our potential. And that is the true definition of education, which is what I was referring to earlier. It is about educating the human potential, the soul. That's true education. And that is what I'm interested in.
What's inspired you about the mystery schools of the past to create what you're currently now shifting into with your work?
Knowing that the patterns, the teachings are all archetypal and can be expressed, studied, and embodied, no matter what lens we look through for those archetypes. For example, the mother, father, divine child archetype can be seen in multiple versions and tellings of that archetype, which is an archetype that we ourselves as humans have within us, as just one example. So Isis, Osiris, and Horus, mother, father, child. And again, there are so many examples through many myths that talk about that. And so knowing that these archetypes are present everywhere means that anyone is able to learn and study from them. There is not a door that someone has to have a password for to get into in order to get this knowledge. It has always been available and always present. You don't need some special ability to tune into this information. It's already right here. And so if someone just gives you the template, then you're able to fill in the rest for yourself, rather than needing to go to someone else and have them tell you how to fill that template in. And I want everyone to remember and embody their sovereignty. And this is a way that I am able to do that at this time. And anybody can do it. Anyone can do it at any time. It does not need to go through me, which feels even more empowering because it's not dependent on me. I am not holding some special key to let someone in on this ancient wisdom. It's present everywhere. And if you are only guided to learning how to see it, then you can remember how to read again. Like I mentioned with this earth, You remember actually how to read and how to listen. It is not dependent on a person outside of you that you need to keep going back to so that you can learn something or be prepared for something that's coming ahead. Because these archetypes are ancient and therefore they are timeless because they are the template of all that is. And if they are timeless, then that means they also tell us the future. And so we are able to know for ourselves what is present and become, again, our own prophets before speech, the symbols of all that is.
I'd love to go just a little bit deeper there, because I'm wondering then, what do you see as the most, or what have you learned to read as the most prominent archetype that is playing out in the next few years?
The trickster.
Humanity.
The trickster. So in my, I haven't spoken to anybody about this, Emilio, so here we go. In my contemplation around all of this, the thing that I really kept coming back to, and it was this nagging feeling, which is, yeah, usually what I experience when I'm like on the brink of something, but my ego is kind of getting in the way, so I have to totally let go. There was this nagging feeling that I could not let go of seeing and sensing some relationship between initiation and archetypes. I could not let this idea go. It was just with me, nagging at me. And I kept contemplating it and going deeper and understanding archetypes more from different perspectives. And I recognized that the levels of initiation, well, first and foremost, something that my own guides have, I guess, taught me, is that the steps to alchemical transmutation are equivalent to the steps of initiation. So let me say that's the foundation that I'm working with, first and foremost. And those steps of initiation are both individual and collective, and they are easily seen through archetypes. Archetypes come out and play a more prominent role. Specific archetypes play a more prominent role during certain levels of initiation. So, at this time that we are in, of disillusionment, of breaking down, there is the trickster energy, which again is like it's laughably obvious to me. I have to laugh sometimes about how ridiculous it is. That's very clear and present. And simultaneously, the energy of the magician is also present. I will say, I will call it the magician, the inner self being able to express, the magician. So both are present right now at this time.
How do those two dance with each other?
See, that's what becomes very interesting, because when you have both of those energies present, that means that the magician can be easily tempted into the trickster. It can fall unconsciously into the energy of the trickster. And that is a little bit what I'm referring to when I say that in this New Age world, there are rather, I'll just say dramatic beliefs that are being put forward for other people to take on as their own beliefs, that are ultimately just distractions. And that is the magician falling prey to the trickster within its own self. And again, we could add in more complex layers of other actual trickster entities that exist. But that is a risk when it comes to, particularly in this line of work, if you will, of channeling for people, is falling into the trickster energy. And at the same time, the magician has and holds the keys to absolute transmutation. The magician is also the alchemist. It's the same being. And so it is Hermes Trismegistus. He is that archetype. Thoth is that archetype. The one who knows and who can't really be seen, but who knows. And it easily falls prey to trickster energy. And so it is, and again, the trickster energy can be perceived as external through entities, through other human beings, and also internal through the shadow aspects that we have not integrated. So it's expressed everywhere, as is the magician.
As we move toward the end of the transmission, I wanted to ask you there, in what ways would you go about ending this perpetuation of false prophecy for any individual that is tuning in today?
When someone chooses to take on responsibility for themselves, a lot of times it can feel like you are guilty of something. And so people don't really like to do that. And people tend to shy away from taking responsibility and accountability for themselves and their life. And so it's easier to put that responsibility onto somebody else outside of you. So I would say the very first step is being okay with taking responsibility. And the greatest threat, if you will, I don't really like that word because it sounds very violent. So let me say this, the strongest antidote to this chaotic energy that we see, which can be expressed in just falsity everywhere, in all forms, in all realms. The greatest antidote to that is coherence in the self. When we are virtuous, we are coherent. Virtues are what guide our ego to being in service to our soul. We must be okay with softening into humility and saying, I don't know, I was wrong, I'm confused, I was mistaken, I don't know everything. And that calls on courage to just be okay with the fact that we don't know. We cannot know. And so if we are willing to take responsibility, it's much easier to be responsible and to feel okay with the responsibility when we are virtuous, because we are coherent and we are not perceiving a threat to us because we are moving with virtuousness. So I think that if someone is able to let go of this addiction to needing to know and constantly looking for all of the information around this conspiracy theory or that new age prophecy or what have you, if we just are able to come back to wisdom, which is simple and true, it's not flashy. It's not flashy. It's the water that runs underground that you don't see, that you forget is there. When we can bring our nervous system, our attention, and this addiction to this stimulation in that way, when we can bring that down to just right here, we really do become our own prophets for ourselves. And it is easier and easier to not consume any information or be distracted off of the path of your own soul's evolution by taking in someone else's belief system and saying that now that has to be my own because I trust this person or because they speak in this certain way. or maybe you even had an energetic experience of some kind when this person was speaking, but you instead are able to experience your own energy right from within you. And the energy of the soul, the language of the soul, the language of this earth, when we learn to read that and listen again, it is not spoken in anxiety-inducing, you must make a decision, this is about to happen, you have to prepare in this way. That's not the way that the underground river speaks. It is very quiet, and it's entirely your own language that you learn for yourself. But you cannot learn it if you are only ever listening to someone else's language around it. And it comes in a steady, nurturing gift rather than some impending action or, again, some upcoming possible prediction that may happen. It comes very differently. And that is the antidote. Virtuosity, coherence within the self, and learning to read again that which is slow and steady, and allowing that to be enough.
It's like a new skill is emerging for a lot of us, and I'm in such deep alignment with what you bring today. Obviously, this conversation started from a voice note you sent me about some disillusionments that you were feeling in the space, and I thought it was so important to give it more light and more exposure as well, because if I were to give my piece into it, if I may, as a person that listens to people for a living, if that makes sense, this would be coming up on my maybe 300th conversation with different people from all over the world and different backgrounds and cultures. For me, the reason I started podcasting in general was because I was in a point in my life where I was 21 years old and I didn't know anything about reality. I had this really big ego in the beginning, before my awakening, where I thought I knew everything. And then all of a sudden that was shattered. And I said, I know nothing. And that led me into this like thirst for knowledge and exploration. And then finally coming across people that I felt weren't speaking about knowledge, but were speaking from wisdom, which was a different energy to me. And I believe to the core we're these communal beings that if you look back in history, like even the Kogis and the tribes in Colombia, they sit around fires at night and they just have these conversations where we get to explore as well what needs to be explored, because we're all a mycelium network. Like one thing that you say is exactly something that I'm thinking, and I feel the telepathy when I have these conversations. And my biggest intention with having these conversations is, and I've had to do a lot of internal work as well and it all started with my nervous system, is how can I speak from a place that actually regulates my nervous system, my vagus nerve, and also those that are here with us as well. And taking these really charged subjects and neutralizing them so that we can witness them and transmute them with love. And so it's really beautiful because it's a combination of a path of going back into our own guidance and higher wisdom, and then also learning to discern what is for us, what isn't for us. A lot of people may think that every person I interview I completely agree with and align with. That's not necessarily the case. That's not the reality, because there's so much out there, and my biggest intention is to explore. I've even had a few guests that told me, hey, I no longer want to be interviewed by you because you interviewed that person over there. And then I'm here going, where's the division? Why are we doing this division? And so I love being able to just open up and say, I don't know anything before going into a conversation, and then walking away from a conversation saying, like something that person expressed in words, beyond the words is an energy that gets shared. And sometimes that energy, there's a match, and it's like, that's going to help propel me. I do believe, and one thing I'll say is, like you said that, I'm not a key, right? I do believe we all sort of hold certain keys or codes even that we share with people that we meet. And so, like, for example, with you, when I was with you in Egypt, so many codes were exchanged, and that even propelled me into a new version of myself. And so, yeah, I mean, I love exploration. I love that you're so focused on the mastery and the guidance. That's why I absolutely love you as a friend and as a guide and as a teacher to me as well. So I really, I'm happy that we opened this container, because it's something that we haven't really explored before in the space, right? And so wanted to thank you and acknowledge you for coming to me with this, and and having the opportunity to share it with more people as well, because you and I have a lot of conversations like off air that are like pretty crazy and wild, and then getting to share a conversation that we are going to have regardless, just the two of us, and say, why don't we just hit record and see what happens? So that was sort of the outcome of what came through today, which was beautiful. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And it is potent, because as you mentioned, we do hold keys and codes for each other. All of us do that. And so the space that you hold, actually, because of part of your own energy, you are able to open things in people, in the person that you're interviewing, as well as the people who are listening. You're able to open things that, as you always say, they transcend the words. Like you said, I think one of your teachers said, the words are the costume. It's not the words that are being used. It's the energy that the words carry, which is another way of saying that it's symbolic. It's just expressed through frequency instead of through a visual. And so visuals also carry frequency. And it's beautiful that you, as a being, are able to hold the number of frequencies that you do. It is something that I certainly admire in you, because I have considered what it would take to be in your position. And that is a role that calls on a lot of mastery, because you are approaching this and holding this as an empty, open vessel, and not latching on to something of either I agree or I disagree. The ability to do that is a teaching unto itself. Even the way that you are showing up to this is a teaching for others, for how we can take in information around us. Not being reactive and instead walking the middle path. What is true here? What is true there? And going forward ourselves with our own discernment. So even the way that you lead an interview, it is a teaching unto itself. And it is certainly something that I admire within you and that teaches me more every day. So thank you also for this space. I appreciate that.
So much love to you, sister. And we end every show with a segment called The Final Trio, as this is not your first rodeo on the podcast, but these questions are personalized to each guest every time. And before we get into that, I would love to give you the space to share what you have going on right now, where people can go further into your work, and also how they can connect with you. I know you have a beautiful community. You also are working, I don't know if you're still doing the readings, but that's evolved as well. So where would you send people to that?
Yeah, thank you. My website, eluñanoel.com, is a good place to go if you want to learn more. You can sign up for my newsletter. And then I do have a community called The Circle, and it is not thecircle.com. I didn't know that existed actually when I made my community. It's called The Circle because it is a place where I want to encourage people to show up to an equal circle, that each person has an equal voice and an equal representation of what they are there to bring. And by sitting in circle, we are able to remember our power, our gifts that we are here to give. When we are given the space and we are given an equitable seat, that is how our strength returns. And so that is the reason behind the name of the circle. And I do offer readings to my members, Akashic readings to my members. It is called an Akashic reading because that is the way that people can understand it. It is a little different. It's quite unique. There is a lot involved in that I won't go into here, but that is something that I do. And this mystery school that is now opening is this shift to offering something deeper to my community. So I already hold monthly of live meditations, but now with this mystery school offering, I am going to be leading circles, essentially, that look at archetypes and initiation and where we are throughout the course of this year, while being able to perceive and understand those archetypes through the lens of what is actually happening on the global stage. So it is I will just be honest and say it is an advanced experience. It's not for someone necessarily who is just jumping into all of this. I will certainly lay the foundation and the groundwork as best I am able, and we will hold, we have a follow-up circle to answer questions, but this is more advanced, because it's also a place where I'm not going to hold back the way that I have been. As I mentioned here, when people start throwing words like conspiracy theories or all number of things, if there is fear around the truth, then this is not a place for you to be learning. That's what I will say, because I'm going to be talking about very deep things that require a lot of a person. So that is going to begin this month, and the opening ceremony for that, when I'm going to be really laying the foundation and the groundwork, is on February 22nd. So if you wish to join, I would love to see you there. And if you want to just know more, you can go to my website. But I'm also on YouTube. If you would like to see videos and wisdom there before you go to my website, I'm also there.
Beautiful. We'll link everything down in the show notes as always. And I'm actually really excited about that new initiative that you're taking with the mystery schools, and excited to learn more about it and also maybe participate if you would have me.
I would love to.
The first question I had for you for the final trio is, when was the last time you truly remembered your magic?
Oh. This morning. This morning, I remembered my magic, and I do every day. Yesterday, if you want a little story, yesterday I remembered to take myself down to the water so that I could become really small again. Going to the water always reminds me, it always brings me into a very deep place of humility, this resource that we call on, and also that is the greatest force, but somehow is the softest at the same time. It can take any shape physically, just about, it fills every form, but also can become multiple things. It can become solid, it can become liquid, it can become vapor. It just brings me into a state of smallness. And while I was there, these very precious birds emerged from this little cave behind a waterfall where they had made a nest. And I got to witness a very dear interaction between them. After some time, they became very safe with me being there. And I got to witness a very beautiful interaction that reminded me of the magic that can be created between two open hearts who are sharing in the field of love. And that was yesterday afternoon that happened.
It's like nature is always the greatest teacher when we can observe it. And that's actually also where the greatest inventions have come from, is through observing nature. What kind of human do you feel will thrive most in the world that's emerging right now?
One who is grounded in virtue, very simply. Because when you are grounded in virtue, there are, of course, a list of virtues that if you don't know them, I would recommend that you look them up to keep them with you, whoever is listening, and contemplate the virtues. There aren't that many of them, and so it's easy to contemplate for a week or a month at a time, and consider how that shows up in your life and how you express that virtue. Because if one is able to truly embody those virtues, or at least, again, practice the embodiment of those virtues, it doesn't matter what is thrown at us collectively or at you as an individual, you are able to move through it with grace. And that is coherence, which is the greatest antidote to what we are moving through. And so those people will thrive and be able to also lead others. Those who are virtuous and coherent will be able to lead others.
Beautiful. The last question I have for you today is, what truth in your teachings did you have to live? Hold on. What truth in your teachings did you have to live for years before you were allowed or able to speak it out loud in your daily life?
This is a really good one. You know, I think the only way that I can accurately answer that question is to say that I am still living it out. And I'm actually still understanding what the greatest teaching is. Because what I have been coming to find is that the moment that we latch on to what we call a truth, it shifts right before us to show us the infinite facets of the divine. And there is not one way. There are infinite ways. And so that is quite abstract. And I feel that is the best way I could put it into words. But if you want something, my guides are saying, give it to the people. If you want a more concrete...
Don't leave a puzzle.
That's exactly. If you want a more concrete...
riddle.
Yes, I know. A more concrete expression and answer to that question would be that every law in the Kybalion, this is really a secret, every law in the Kybalion mimics a law in quantum physics. And as quantum physics is an expression of the law of reality, when you know those laws, you become a master of reality. Because those who know laws are able to use them in whatever way they wish.
What's the greatest way you've used your understanding of the laws of reality in your life?
You know, there are a lot of fun answers to that question that people might feel more fun about when it comes to like creating your own timeline and being able to manipulate matter, etc. But the one that is the most fundamental and that consequently and quite paradoxically from my perspective holds the most amount of facets, and every time I look at it, it's like I understand it differently, is the very first law, which is all is mind. The universe is mental. And that is the understanding that leads to all truth. But it can only be understood in a metaphoric way, and then in a way that sees beyond what we are told is the reality of things, because it ends up putting on us that it is our mind and a greater mind that is conceiving of and therefore creating this reality, which is why when you change your perception, you change your reality.
There it is. Bringing it back to simplicity. Kind of.
I know. Seemingly, yes.
Eluña, thank you so much for your beautiful energy, as you always share so abundantly. And it's been a ride. I feel like we've known each other now for maybe 3 years. It's felt like we've known each other for lifetimes at this point, and we've gone through lifetimes of experience together. And I know we will continue to do so. So I know myself and this beautiful community love when you come on and share your light with the world. So I can't wait to do this again. And now we have a much needed personal catch up that we have to get to. So we'll close it out here, and we'll see everyone until next time. Thank you so much.